Welcome back to So You Really Want to Learn Latin, and today we are going to just look at a couple of exceptional forms that we get in Latin, particularly in Latin verse. And then we are going to, as promised, do a little bit more scansion, and then we will be pretty much finished for the course. So first of all, I just want to start with some exceptional forms. Now, they are all listed. We are on page 106 in the book, right at the end of chapter 10 of book 3. And there are things that we often get in Latin verse, which, loosely you can just summarize as being shortened forms. Okay, so when a Latin word would typically kind of go on a bit, in verse it's often shortened. Okay, now we're going to start with the third person plural of the perfect tense. This is a very, very common one. Okay, now you all know the third person plural perfect tense of amor, for example, is amoverunt. Okay, mono, it's monuerunt. Rego, rexerunt. Okay, with that kind of air noise. Now, that form is very, very commonly shortened to ere rather than erunt. Okay, so you get amovere, monuere, rexere, audivere. Okay, now if you're not careful, it looks a little bit like a present infinitive ending, kind of ere. You think, oh, it's a present infinitive. But if you recognize the verb and you realize, grammatically, well, actually, that looks to me like a main verb, what's going on, that's probably what's happened. Third person plural, perfect tense, erunt is very, very commonly shortened to ere. Okay, now a second one to look out for is this tends to happen with fourth conjugation verbs. The audio forms that go iwi, iwisti, iwit, okay, with that V. Okay, now these are very often shortened. The first person singular, iwi, is very often shortened to ii. So instead of audiwi, meaning I have heard, you get audii, meaning I have heard. Okay, so that's a tricky one. Similarly, the second person singular, audiwisti, is very often shortened to audiste, okay, with a long I, audiste. You're crushing iwisti into isti. And another one to look out for with audio type verbs is the perfect infinitive. So where you would expect audiwisse, you often get audisse. Okay, again with a long I. Now, similar things happen, amo-type verbs, for example. Instead of amarwisse, you sometimes see amasse, okay, meaning to have loved. So arwisse is squishing to arse. Other contractions to look out for, verbs like deileo, okay, with those two E's, deileo, instead of delewiste, you get deleiste, okay, contraction. And then you even see funny things that instead of from cognosco, I get to know, I learn, instead of cognoverant, okay, that third person plural pluperfect tense, cognoverant, you just get cognorant. Not very common, that one, but you can see what's happening. Just sometimes we're squishing words, and the main reason we're squishing them is to make them fit the meter. And while we're looking at weird forms, these ones are really hard. So second person of a passive form, like think of amor in the future, amor bor, amor beris, amor bitter, amor bimmer, amor bimni, amor buntur. Okay, so that form amor beris can become amor bere, and similarly in the imperfect, amor baris can become amor bare. Okay. Now you can see with all of these things, the capacity for causing confusion is enormous. Because if you don't recognise the verb itself, you just don't really know, is that just a present infinitive, you know, amarbere, from the verb kind of amarbo or something? You know, I mean, I can't help except that it means when you learn your vocabulary, you really have to learn it properly. You know, with verbs, you've got to learn the principal parts so you know exactly how the verb is going. And when you're meeting a form in Latin from a verb you don't know, you don't recognise, you've got to be open-minded. And when you see something like amarbare, you've just got to be thinking, well, I don't know this verb. You know, I mean, obviously you do know amo, but let's pretend you didn't. I don't know this verb, and I've got to be careful. Is it a present infinitive of a verb such as amarbo, okay? Or is it the second person singular imperfect passive of a verb like amo? You know, so tricky, I know, but life is. Okay. Oh, and while I'm on weird forms, I'll just do one more. And again, this is a very common one. Third declension accusative plural endings, like ace, regace, regace, regace. Okay. Now, this rule applies to nouns and adjectives that have a genitive plural in ium as opposed to . Okay, so omnis, okay, omnium, omnibus, omnibus, okay, that kind of form, or kiwium, okay. So a noun or an adjective that has a genitive plural in ium, okay, that's the group of words we're talking about. The accusative plural, which should end es, like omnes, is very often found as omnis, is, but long I, omnis. Okay, that happens quite often. So yet again, when you're translating Latin verse, you know, there are so many things going on. Just be aware that is could be an accusative plural ending. It looks a bit like a genitive singular or a dative or ablative plural if it was a kind of first or second declension creature. But if you've identified it as being a third declension noun or adjective, it might be an accusative plural, not a genitive singular. Okay? Right. So lots and lots of funny little exceptional forms to be aware of. Okay? Now, there's quite a good little exercise in the book, 10.8, which runs through, it gives you 10 examples of kind of weird contracted forms, and you've got to identify which ones they are. Have a go at that. But as promised, I'm just going to do a couple more lines of scansion, preferably with some of these kind of funny things going on, so that you can hone your skills. Okay, so let's have a go. Okay, well, I'm actually going to grab the first line of Aeneid Book 2. Okay, because I don't know if you've noticed, but every time I've tried to scan either a hexameter line or a pentameter line, I've always said, oh, first thing we do is look for elision. And it just turns out that there never has been any. So I'm going to grab a line which I know does have some elision going on. It also happens to have one of these contracted verb forms. So it's a nice one to go for. Okay? So Aeneid, Book 2, line 1 goes, Quantiquer omnes intentique ora tenebant. Okay? So we are going to, as always, write that out and scan it. Okay? So, Quantiquer omnes intentique ora tenebant. Okay? Now, I have a habit of getting my rules in the wrong order when I do this, just off the top of my head, so I'll actually check I'm doing them in the right order. The rules, remember, on page 104, which show you the order in which to do things to get your scansion right. Okay, now, number 1, look for elision. Okay, remember, elision occurs where a word ends in a vowel or an M, and the next word begins with a vowel or an H. Okay, so let's have a little go. Now, look at this. So, the first word, conticuere, ends in an E, and the second word, omnes, begins with an O. So, elision occurs. Now, the way we do this is we literally just put brackets around the, typically you put it around the vowel, or if it's an M, the vowel and the M. It's kind of the syllable that you are eliding. Okay? We're not too fussy about whether the R is part of that syllable or part of the previous syllable. That's kind of not really the point here. All we know is that the E of conticuere is going to elide into omnes. Okay? And it'll sort of be pronounced conticuere omnes. Okay? You'll lose the E. Right, now we'll just check there isn't any more elision, and I have one eyeball on the fact that there might be. So omnes intentique. Okay, que ends in a vowel. Next word, ora, begins with a vowel. So again, we're going to elide the que into the ora, and that will be intenticora. Okay, you'll lose the que noise. Okay, and then ora to name. Right, that's elision done. We have managed to get some elision done. Okay, now we're going to look for diphthongs and mark them as long. Right, there are no diphthongs. Number 3, look for a vowel followed by 2 consonants, just being careful that if the second of the 2 consonants is an L or an R, this may not work. But normally it does. So, right, the very first syllable, conticuere, that is a long O because it's O followed by N and T. Nothing very fancy going on there. Right, the O of omnes, it's an O followed by an M and an N. Okay, so that's going to be long. Right, omnes, E followed by no, we don't know. Right, the I of intenti, that's going to be long. I followed by N and T. The E of intenti, that's E followed by N and T. Okay, so that's going to be long. Intenti, don't really know what's going on there, or I don't know. Tenebunt. Okay, and right at the end, the A of tenebunt, A followed by NT. That will be long. Okay, that's the 3. Right, now this is rule number 4, it's the one I tend to forget. 2 vowels together, not pronounced as a diphthong. Right, conticu. Right, in the first word, conticuere, we've got conticu, the U of conticu going into the E of conticuere. So that U must be short, okay? Because it's a U in front of an E, but it's not a diphthong, so it's pronounced as a separate, short vowel sound, okay? Right, let's see if there are any others of those. Okay, no more of those. So that's gone quite nicely. Now what have we got? Mark the final 5 syllables. Always a good one, this, because, you know, we know it's going to finish da-diddy-da-da, or conceivably da-diddy-da-di. Okay, so we've already scanned the last syllable as bunt with a long A, and we therefore know that the syllable before that will also be long because it's going to finish da-da. Okay, so we can put a division line marking off that sixth foot. And we know that the syllable immediately before that will be short because the fifth foot of a hexameter line is always a dactyl. Okay, so it's te for teneband. The A of aura must be short because this is a dactyl, and the O must be long because this is a dactyl. So you get aura teneband. Okay, so there are the final 2 feet. Okay, now we've done that, we mark the quantities of any syllables which you know from your grammar to be either long or short. Okay, now let's have a look at this in terms of our grammar. Now, we've just learned a new verb form, a contracted verb form, which is where instead of amawerunt, you get amawere. Okay. Now, quantiquere is one of these third-person plural perfect tenses contracted. It's contracted from quantiquerunt, and it's gone to quantiquere. Notice ere or erunt. That E is always long. That is a long sound, and that applies to all perfect tenses in Latin. Okay? The third person plural is always erunt, or if contracted, ere. So it doesn't matter whether it's contracted or not, it's going to be long. Okay, so the quantiquere. Now, we actually already knew that because, do you remember, we're kind of jumping ahead a bit to the next one, which is use process of elimination. Short syllables always come in pairs. So because we've got a short syllable in quantiquere, we know there's a short either to the left of it or to the right of it. And if you think about it, it kind of has to be to the left of it. Why? Well, corn is long. Now, the next syllable, we've said we don't yet know, is it long or is it short? Well, if it was short, okay, we would have a dactyl at the beginning, cornticu. So that would be nice. Let's imagine, however, that we thought, well, what if it's long? Well, if it were long, we'd have cornti, and that would be the end of the first foot, because we'd have started with a spondy, and then our next foot would begin with a short syllable. And in a hexameter line, that never happens. Okay? So there are kind of 2 reasons why we know what's going on in this first word. But we'll stick to what we were doing, which is from our knowledge of grammar. And our knowledge of grammar tells us that the third person plural, perfect tense of a verb, the E noise at the end of erunt is always long. So I'm going to mark it as long. Okay? Into the word omnes. From our knowledge of grammar, we know that the third declension, nominative, vocative, and accusative plural ending is ace with a long E, not S. Not S. Okay, it's long. So we can mark that as long. We've also just learned, by the way, that if that's an accusative plural, it could have been written as omnes. Okay, doesn't actually change the scansion, but just bringing in that point. Okay, so we're marking omnes long from our knowledge of grammar. Right, intentique. Now the que just means and. Remember, you put que on the end of a word, and it means and, whatever the word is. So the word is intenti. So the E, the letter I at the end of a word, whether it's a noun or an adjective, unless you're looking at a word like mihi or tipi, those pronouns, if it's a normal kind of first/second declension adjective, like intentus, the letter I at the end of that word must be long, because it's either nominative plural or it's genitive singular, and in both cases that is a long I. So again, from our knowledge of grammar, I'm going to mark that little chappy as long. Okay. and then we've kind of run out of things to mark. So it's all going pretty smoothly. Right, now we come into the process of elimination. Work backwards, so from right to left, finishing feet where you can. Okay, now the fourth foot is somewhere in this word intenti, but we know that it's going to, so we're looking either for a dactyl or a spondy. We don't have any short syllables. We've just got the two longs of tenti, and the que noise, which does sound short, isn't there because it has elided into aura. So we know, therefore, that the fourth foot is tenti. Okay, so that's our fourth foot. Then we come back into the third foot, and we've already got a spondy marked, ace and ind. So that's our third foot. Our second foot we've already got marked, and the first foot we've only got one syllable that we haven't yet marked, and we've already discussed that a process of elimination tells us that second syllable has to be short, because short syllables in a hexameter line always come in pairs, So apart from the fact, you might know the word conticuere, it's not conti, but even if it were, it couldn't have been, because short syllables come in pairs. Okay, so there we are, conticuere omnes intentiquora tenebant. Okay, so there we are. We've scanned another line. We've coped with some elision. We've coped with a contracted verb form, and we are basically ready to leap out into the world, scanning Latin verse wherever you see it. Okay, just one thing. I'll almost certainly at some later stage do more videos on scanning Latin verse. But just one thing I want to leave you with is, although when you scan a line, you mark the syllables as long or short, and that gives you a kind of pattern, either a hexameter pattern or a pentameter pattern, where you're going kind of da-diddy. This one, for example, goes da-diddy da-da-da-da-da-da-da-diddy da-da. Okay? Although that is the case, that is the pattern, what the Romans did not do was change the way they stressed the Latin words. Okay? So the rules of stress, I don't know if you ever read them. In this book, I give you a wonderful little guide to pronunciation right at the beginning of the book. In this one, on page 3, we've got the rules of how to stress a Latin word, which you may or may not remember. Worth going back and having a look at that. But the point is, Latin words were stressed according to the rules of stress, and sometimes where you stress a word in Latin coincides with the pattern suggested by the da-diddy-da-diddy-da-diddy kind of thing that you've got in the verse. Because, although I haven't told you this yet, I'm going to tell it to you now. If you've got a hexameter line with 6 feet, there is a natural tendency to put a little bit of stress on the first syllable of every foot. Okay, so da-diddy, da-da, 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 da-diddy, da-da. Okay, that's the kind of natural emphasis of the meter, the longs and the shorts. But it mustn't override totally the natural way you would stress the line. Okay, now I'm only going to give you one example of this in this line we've just scanned, of where you've got to be careful. So, the first verb, conticuere. Okay, now you actually stress that word as conticuere, and it elides, so it's conticuere. Okay, and the r bit elides. but nonetheless you want to stress it on the penultimate E, the conticuere. Okay, you can mark where you stress a word. Some people put a little, like an acute accent. Now, that stress mark happens to come, okay, it's not at the beginning of the word, but it happens to come at the beginning of the second foot, so that's very handy. But look at the next word, which is omnes. Now, with a Latin word, you never stress the last syllable. Okay, so if it is a two-syllable word, you would have to stress the first syllable, right? But the meter here is suggesting that we should be going omnes, okay? Because the nace bit is the beginning of the third foot. So there's a kind of natural weight put on it. However, the natural stress of the word is on the o. So in that second foot, you've actually stressed both syllables, the kind of final syllable of the first word and the first word of the second word, and both stresses are coming in the second foot. And then in the third foot, although there is a natural desire to kind of put some weight on the first syllable of the foot, in other words, the omnes, the next word is intentique. Okay, intentique. You're putting the stress on the intenti, which means in that third foot, neither of those two syllables are getting stressed. And actually, interestingly, that is where the caesura comes. So it's quite cool. In the third foot, you've got the caesura, the natural break between two words which are not very, very, very closely joined, like a preposition and a noun, and neither syllable either side of the caesura got a natural word stress. Okay. Moving on, aura, that you naturally stress the O of aura because it's a two-syllable word and you never stress the last syllable of a two-syllable word. So there you've got the word stress and the meter both getting the same kind of weight. And then with the word tenebant, you pronounce that as tenebant. The stress is therefore on the tene, and that's where you want to put the stress anyway because that's the first syllable of the foot. Okay, so that's just something to look out for. When you finish scanning a line, try not to read the line purely following the da diddy da diddy da 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 diddy da diddy da da type, emphasis, because sometimes the word is stressed out of kilter with the meter. Okay, it's a whole subject that we might look into later, but for now, do have a go at the exercises at the end of this chapter, where you've got a whole load of elegiac couplets. The great thing about scanning elegiac couplets is you practice both hexameters and pentameters, so what's not to like? Okay, right, now that is pretty much it. We've got one more lesson in this course on the Latin, and we've got one more little history bit to do on Augustus, but until then, keep up the good work. See you back on this channel very soon.